Okay, so first I'd like to welcome Dr. Haley Titus. I didn't know Haley had groupies. That's pretty cool. Dr. Ari Green. And Dr. Cheryl Fife Marisich. All right, let's get started. All right. Comfy?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Cheryl, you're closest to me, so I'll start with you. As we just heard from Tim, there's been tremendous progress in MS research over the last 5 years. So what area of research most excites you, and how's the work you're doing moving things forward?
All right, well, what excites me most about MS research right now is definitely myelin repair, and that's something that my lab focuses on. How I came to study myelin repair is actually a really interesting story. It started a number of years ago when I was a graduate student, actually right here in Texas, and I had the opportunity to take part in the BP MS 150 bike race. And I rode my bike from Houston to Austin, and it was really through that experience that I had a chance to meet some people who have MS. And I had a chance to meet some members of the MS Society. And I was so motivated by that experience that really it was at that moment that I decided my scientific goal would be to cure MS. So I think I was... So I think I was probably a little naive. I'm not sure I recognized how lofty that goal was at the time. But here I am a number of years later. I'm still studying MS. I'm still dedicated to that goal. What my lab is doing right now is focusing really on myelin repair. And so we know that all of us have cells called oligodendrocytes that make that myelin sheath, or that fatty coating that surrounds our nerve cells. That's really important for our ability to move and to function. And we know that people who have MS still have those cells, and so that's really, really promising. But what happens, and one of the problems in MS, is that those cells stop making myelin, and we really don't understand why that happens. And so we think about it in my lab kind of like this. So imagine that you're driving your car, and you stop at a stoplight, and the light turns green. You put your foot on the gas, and you don't go anywhere. And so there could be a number of things going on. Maybe you ran out of gas, or maybe you just drove into a huge mud puddle, and your wheels are turning, but you can't move forward. And so what we really try to do in my lab is understand the different genes, the different molecules, the different signaling pathways that are really important to drive those oligodendrocytes to make that myelin. We also try to understand what those inhibitory factors are, kind of like that mud. What is it that's keeping those cells from being able to make myelin? And so hopefully, by understanding that basic biology, then we can eventually move to developing specific treatments that will target those molecules and help people with MS.
Wow, that's a terrific analogy. Do you mind if I use that one later sometime? That was really awesome. Ari, you're translating the results from some really interesting lab research, and you're now testing a promising repair strategy, repurposing an antihistamine in a clinical trial, along with Jonah Chan and the team at UCSF. Can you tell us how things are going and what you hope to achieve with this clinical trial?
Sure. So I guess in simple terms, what we hope to achieve is success. I mean, we want a therapy that's going to work. But we recognize there's a lot of steps on the road to making that success happen. And we're happy, we're very pleased that we've achieved some of those successes. So we really started a project that I know some of you may have heard about in 2013, in the beginning of 2013. April of 2013, developed a new technology in Jonah Chan's lab that we could use to screen for possible medicines that could help us to do what Cheryl was talking about, which is make those cells that are sitting there in the brain, those oligodendrocyte precursor cells, turn into the myelinating oligodendrocytes and do their work. And did the screen then, screened 1,000 molecules, identified some drugs that worked in test tubes and in animals, and then we started a clinical trial. And we started a clinical trial in early 2014, and we finished that clinical trial about a month ago. So we are just about ready to analyze that data, I'm barely getting any sleep at night as we think about, are we gonna achieve what we want to achieve, which is seeing a drug that shows us the path forward to move forward with remyelinating therapies. As a little aside, the reason we have so many therapies in immunomodulatory space able to dampen down the overactive immune system in MS is because the pathway is set for us. We know what we need to do in order to take those therapies from the test tube to animals to people, and it's led to an influx of enthusiasm both from advocacy groups and from private industry. We don't know how to do that yet in repair. And if we can show with any of the trials that are ongoing, but we're especially excited about ours, if we can show that works, it's the pathway forward for the next stage, and that's really what we're hoping for. We're going to work on modifying those chemicals to make better ones, and hopefully we'll, in the next few years, be back here talking to you guys about the next projects as we move forward.
So it's a little bit like Christmas right now, right? It's the day before Christmas. It's Christmas Eve, I guess, would be better.
Exactly.
They're anxiously awaiting the results of that. I know we all are anxiously awaiting the results for that. So thank you for that. Haley, I knew I was going to see you up here one of these days. She's a rock star, Haley. She just began her postdoctoral fellowship at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, and she's in the lab with Dr. Stephen Miller. Congratulations, Haley.
Thank you.
I know that you have a personal connection to MS, so could you share with us how that connection has influenced your journey in MS research?
I'd love to, thanks. So like many of you in the room, my first connection to MS was a family member. My mother has MS, and like many people, she was diagnosed in her late 20s. She actually worked in a research lab in a hospital, and she couldn't see through her microscope one day. So this was in the 80s, and back then it was really process of elimination. So she knew she had MS, and she decided in the 90s to be one of those very active people, like again, many people sitting in this room that wanted to help with the clinical trials. Anything that came out in Cleveland Clinic, she tried. She tried chemotherapy, she tried deep brain stimulation, and all these things worked for a little bit of time, and then she would try the next thing. She even tried homeopathic bee sting therapy at one point. Anything that sounded good, she tried. And even now, she has secondary progressive MS. She's still incredibly optimistic, incredibly positive, incredibly strong, incredibly independent. So when I was pursuing, my ideas of what I thought I wanted to be when I was little, you guys will laugh. I really wanted to be a veterinarian, okay? So I shadowed vets when I was in middle school for hundreds of hours. I really wanted to be a veterinarian. And in 8th grade, when I think I was 12 or 13, I asked my dad if I could switch to people, okay? He said yes, he said yes. So there that happened. I think I was 13. So when I switched to people, I really thought that I wanted to go into medicine. So yeah, that's laughable, I know. So I ended up shadowing surgeons. I ended up becoming an emergency medical technician at my local hospital. It was really fun. But when I was 21, I actually went to a leadership experience with my undergraduate institution, and they asked you at the age of 21 to write down your life goal. So much like Cheryl, you have this moment where you decide what you want to devote your life to, and I wrote down I wanted to cure MS. And so the people at this experience really challenged me to say, well, what steps are you going to take to get there? And I said, well, I'm going to go to medical school. And they said, well, that's great, but if there aren't any, at this time there weren't a lot of disease-modifying therapies, how are you really going to help people if, if you can't prescribe them something for someone like with progressive MS? And so that really frustrated me, actually, because I had my life plan. I was very organized. And so I decided to see if I liked research. I did a master's program to decide officially if I wanted to do medical school or a PhD. And I fell in love with research, absolutely fell in love with it. And so it's really exciting to be on the side, like Cheryl said, that you can actually dive in and try to figure out the unanswered questions and try to figure out what is the next therapy and try to help solve problems that haven't been answered yet. So, my mom inspires me every single day, and I'm really passionate about helping find the next cure for MS and all types of MS, so not just relapsing remitting, but also the progressive forms, which we know are very different. And it's exciting to be in such a great group of fellows and people that are really passionate about it and can share ideas. So,
thank you for sharing that,
yeah.
Haley. Thank you. as I've been with the society now for almost 4 years, there are a lot of stories like yours. There are a lot of people that are researching or taking care of people with MS that have a personal connection that inspired them to start. And of course, once you start, you
Yes.
can't help but develop a personal connection. I appreciate you sharing that story with us. Ari, we've made a lot of progress. Haley alluded to that with 13 disease-modifying treatments for relapsing forms of MS. And life is much different now than it was when my mother and your mother were diagnosed with MS. But we really are in urgent need of solutions for progressive MS. So what's on the horizon, and what's the next frontier you think that gives you hope for people living with progressive MS?
Yeah. So I think this is a moment of tremendous excitement for progressive MS. I mean, we've had this flurry of success with relapsing remitting disease, and it's gone on for 2 decades, and it's been exceptional. But it is our next frontier, and the tremendous excitement that's building is in the last 2 weeks. We've learned about a therapy that actually has effect, and it was really pioneered. I mean, this speaks to both the perseverance in science. It speaks to accidents in science. Discoveries are sometimes made when you think you're researching something, you end up discovering something else. And it was really the perseverance of a team led by Steve Hauser, who's the chairman of our department, who pushed forward to say, we've got to try this out. We tried it out. It's taken about 1.5 decades, but led to the first trial for a therapy that addresses progressive MS, seems to have an effect. Now, there's other areas where I think there's other things going on in progressive MS, and I think remyelination and repair are the other super exciting areas, and then addressing the additional needs that patients have. How do we make sure that people can live their best lives?
Thank you, Ari. I think for a long time, Steve was swimming upstream with a B-cell story because nobody really believed that this particular kind of white blood cell that's targeted by ocrelizumab had anything to do with MS. And so perseverance is a great trait to have as a scientist, and we owe a lot of debt of gratitude to Steve for pursuing that. So I'll just follow up with that. The company that's sponsored the study, Roche, with ocrelizumab, said in their press release that they were applying for approval from the authorities, the European authorities and American FDA, but it's going to take a while. They said it's early 2016. It's probably at least a year after that before. So we've got some time to wait, and we've been obviously waiting a long time. So what can people do before, in the absence of a disease-modifying treatment to help with the progressive MS?
I think this is a crucial question. I think the first part is really has to do with maintaining health. So it's absolutely crucial that people stay active. And we were actually talking about this morning at the Tychison conference, the fact that the brain is much more plastic than we imagined even 10 or 20 years ago. And we recognize that activity, staying engaged and involved, is crucial. I mean, I sometimes liken MS, or I sometimes use the analogy for MS to say it's a disconnection syndrome. It doesn't only disconnect nerve cells from other nerve cells, but it also disconnects people from their community. And what we've got to work on is making sure that people stay engaged in that community, not only because it's important for their mental health and important for their hope and their continued perseverance in the face of MS, but also because it's important for keeping those connections alive, rerouting connections in the brain. It's crucial that people stay physically active, stay healthy, and really to get involved too, I think, is another crucially important thing. And whatever kind of involvement that means, if it means getting involved with community organizations that aren't related to MS, that's great. But if it means getting involved in the movement to help us all fix this problem, I think that's even better. So that's what I advise everybody who I speak to.
We've been hearing a lot about comorbidities and how they may affect progression.
Yeah.
So I wonder just a brief comment about how wellness and lifestyle can affect comorbidities and how that might affect progression also.
Yeah. So I think physical activity like exercise is probably at the top of the list, but it's also pretty clear that carrying extra weight or obesity is a risk factor for developing MS. And everything we've seen that's a risk factor for developing the disease also probably seems to be able to modulate the disease and make it worse. So carrying extra weight's probably bad. Smoking is certainly bad. And maybe the last one that there's a little inkling on is high salt. There's some really amazing research that's come out on that topic, but that remains to be proven.
Thank you, Ari. So Cheryl, what do you think about the growing sort of collaborative approach to MS research? And how do you think that's going to speed solutions for people living with progressive MS?
Yeah, I think we've made some really great strides in that area, and I think collaboration is really going to be the key to our future success in really finding better therapies and ultimately finding a cure. I kind of think about it in the way that somebody with MS approaches the treatment of their disease. So if you have MS, you probably have a neurologist. You might also have a physical therapist. You might have a dietitian. You might work with a support group. And so really it's coming together of a lot of different specialists that really makes us successful in managing such a complex disease. And so I think as researchers, we kind of have to take the same approach. And there are some of us are specialized as biochemists, some of us are molecular geneticists, some of us are good at doing really fancy imaging. And so bringing all of those specialists together, I think it not only makes our research move faster, but it also makes it more likely that we're going to make really important discoveries.
Thank you. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I realized as we were walking up here just a few minutes ago that we have all of our guests here are fellows of the MS Society, and we have the whole continuum of our different fellowship programs represented on stage, and that was really actually an accident. I didn't know that we had that until we walked up on stage, so it inspired a question. So Haley is a postdoctoral fellow of the Society, and Ari was a career transition fellow and now a Harry Weaver Fellow, our most prestigious fellowship award. And Cheryl is currently a career transition award, and that's pretty cool. So I want to start with Haley and just ask you, Haley, as a fellow postdoctoral, a former postdoctoral fellow, I mean, what did the fellowship mean to you? How's it helping your career?
Right. I think it's an amazing opportunity, and like we just talked about, the collaborative aspects of science and how we're moving into that realm. It opens up a lot of conversations and interactive collaborations. It also gives you a support system, and it gives you structure. You have to think about, what do I want to do for the next 3 years? What exciting question can I answer because I know I have the support of the MS Society? And then who do I want to work on this with? And what can we do that's different, that's actually going to make a difference and go into possibly clinical trials? So for me, when I was trying to decide what I was going to do, you're always supposed to learn something a little bit new. And I'm actually learning immunology as a neuroscientist to kind of make myself even better at curing MS, let's call it that. And so it was a really unique opportunity for me to learn something different and hopefully grow, as well as give something back to the MS Society.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'll go to you, Ari.
Sure. So, I mean, I've been fortunate to have funding on multiple occasions, as you mentioned, from the MS Society, and it really, I mean, especially when we're young and we're trying to get started, it allows us to stay focused, but it also allows us to take risks. And it's just an exceptional opportunity in science, because as you can speak to the people sitting at your table, you can learn scientific work it's hard work. I mean, it's days and days on end when you don't make discoveries, followed by hopefully little punctuated moments when you do something important. And the appreciation we get from patients, those of us who are clinicians, keeps us motivated and keeps us inspired. But the people working in the laboratory day in and day out, their inspiration comes from interacting with foundations like the National MS Society. And I can say, I mean, I do the MS write-up in Northern California every year, and interacting with people, even the people who don't have MS, who are committed to this movement, those people, they put wind in our sails and move us forward. So by being part of the National MS Society, it just keeps us pushed forward. It reminds us what we're doing it for, and the tough moments when we're faced down with paperwork on the clinical side or challenges on the research side. It just keeps us moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And Cheryl?
Yeah, so I mean, my experience has been really very similar. I actually started like Haley as a postdoctoral fellow, and now I have a career transition award, and maybe someday I'll be like Ari with a Harry Weaver. So I think it's so important for us to remember, just like Ari said, we have to remember what we do in the lab sometimes is so small. We spend our day looking down a microscope. tiny, tiny little cells. You can't even imagine how small they are. It's really easy for us to lose sight of the big picture. And the MS Society not only provides us with that financial support that's important, it provides us with a sense of community. It enables us as young researchers to really collaborate in a way that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And it helps, most of all, remind us of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make people with MS better. And so I think that that's really critical.
Awesome, thank you for that. All right, we're almost to time, but I do have one more question. This is your 5-floor elevator response to this question, okay? So I'll start with you, Haley. As a young researcher working on the cutting edge of MS research, how do you think life's going to be different for people living with MS in the next 5 years?
So I will be brief, but I think we're really on the cusp of figuring out how to selectively suppress the immune system instead of, for lack of a better term, sledgehammer it. And that's why I'm really excited about the research that I'm doing right now. So keep your ears open and your eyes peeled. And we're also testing, like Ari said, FDA-approved therapies that hopefully will go into patients if they're successful and have combinations for people to try that hopefully will completely stop the disease and reverse damage and restore some function. So I think it's really hopeful.
Great. Okay, the elevator's going down, Ari.
Yeah.
Well, I think she summarized it really well, but we're going to manage what we have now, and we're going to move on to new therapies that are going to make a major difference. I think we are in the one area of clinical neuroscience where we've had successful therapeutics, and it's thanks to folks who push and advocate this movement forward. And in fact, it's going to spill over, I think, to the other areas of neuroscience that haven't yet had successes, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. But the MS movement is really, it's a train, and I don't think it's going to be stopped, and we're going to move on to getting therapies that are going to help us with repair.
Excellent. Okay,
Right.
we got 5 floors left.
Okay, I think this is an incredibly exciting time for MS research right now. I think we all appreciate how important it is to do these research studies. We're really pushing forward on the front of myelin repair, which I think is incredibly exciting. I think the next 5 years are going to bring some really great new therapies to help people live a better life.
Great. Well, that's extremely inspirational to me. I hope it was inspirational to you. I want to thank each of our participants for sharing their time and their perspective. Your work's so important in changing the lives of people living with MS.
Thank you, Bruce.
So please help me thank our panelists with a round of applause. And